I'm Shea, Head of Solutions at IPQS, and I'm joined with special guest Jaanus, Head of Fraud over at Bolt. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good.
Beautiful. Um, Today we're going to be going over navigating the daily threats in account security. So nowadays we see a lot of threats in account takeover, or fake account registrations, things like this. And so we'll be kind of discussing topics around what should you be doing, um, or what are the best practices with respect to um, account security, trust and safety, compliance, and making sure that you have the best insight into your users. Giannis, you and I talked about something at MRC that I'd learned earlier this year, and I just want to open up with this. But most companies in the United States, everybody handles their own authentication and uses a third-party authentication provider. I found out that banks over in Europe or East Europe or Scandinavia, they act as sort of an authentication provider. Um, and so I just thought that was very interesting. A bank is how you log into an e-commerce platform. I could imagine using something like Bank of America to access my Amazon account in the US. So, um, any insight or anything interesting around that?
You're right about it, yes, that this kind of solution exists. Of course, not in all the countries in Europe. So in Europe, it's also, even though it's one European Union, it's very fragmented when it comes to payments and authentication. But it does exist in many places that you use your bank as a gateway authenticator. Almost like in many websites, you will see globally that you use Google account or Microsoft account to generate an account. And I guess the benefit of using a bank obviously is that by regulation, banks have done quite good KYC and authentication of the customers. So whoever is using that information to allow users to come to their platform can assume that these users have been vetted before, and banks obviously have quite good security measures in place as well. So this does exist, which is, yeah, quite a neat feature. I didn't even think about it that this doesn't exist in the US for whatever reason. Uh, but like in Estonia, where I live, we have even a better solution. So we have digital IDs called mobile ID and smart ID. So you have an authenticator app on your phone, and it's pretty much universal. So in all the services that you would use, both public and private sector ones, you just use that app to authenticate yourself. So your ID code, then you enter your PIN, and you're in, which is good and bad at the same time. It's good because it's super convenient to log in and do everything. You can log into your bank with that and do other things as well. But it's also creates a vulnerability that fraudsters are now taking advantage of it. They're scamming people, they're social engineering. So once you convince somebody to enter your PIN, which is equal to a signature in Estonia. So when you enter your special PIN code, it's the same as signing a document. So if you convince somebody of doing that, you will lose a lot of money. And it's
Yeah.
happening on a daily basis here.
Yeah, so we have then banks as an authentication provider. We have governments as an authentication provider that comes with a couple different risks in of itself, or um, a bit of a trade-off where, you have increased security, but the vulnerability there is kind of greater if you are compromised. Um, does Bolt accept either of those? I guess authentication providers, or how do you guys handle that?
We don't like Bolt. We're a global company. We operate in more than 50 countries in Europe and Africa and also now in America and Asia. So we need to have a solution which works everywhere.
Right.
So yeah, that is banks or governmental portals. It doesn't make sense to integrate it just for one country. So we use the pretty standard approach for our providers, which would be our drivers on the platform or restaurants. they have usually the standard username password combination, right? And then for user accounts, for the longest time, we had your phone number as your identifier, and then the way you would log in from a new device is that we will send you a one-time passcode to your number as an SMS. So that way you
Mm,
authenticate that's you. But now we also
yeah,
have a possibility of using social media. I think Google works as well, Google accounts.
gotcha. Yeah, Google as the authentication provider there.
Mm.
Um, What kinds of so with that, what kinds of abuse did you see or have you seen or solve for? I imagine using a phone number, typically what we see there is kind of instances of a SMS pumping or that sort of budget drain attack on those sorts of authentication flows. But what else have you seen?
Yeah, the SMS one is definitely a big one. I think anybody who has some sort of flows which triggers an SMS message to a phone number, they're probably seeing it right now. And if you're not seeing it, you should be looking at your phone bill because that's happening peak time. And there seems like many groups who are actively doing that. And they're very persistent as well that we've been able to kind of shut them down. So we don't send SMSs, which means that there is no cost to us. Therefore, they cannot make money either. But we see that they just continue trying. So that must mean that actually triggering the SMS, this flow for the fraudsters is probably very, very cheap. It doesn't cost them anything. So they just keep trying, even if they don't get through at all. They just hope that at some point, whatever happens to our system, maybe there's a temporary hiccup or something, they will get through. So this is a constant thing, and obviously some of the SMSs get through as well. They play around, try to beat our velocity rules and information like this. So it is a constant problem. Like that's not going away. And additionally, what we see now is social engineering and account takeover becoming a bigger problem. And this is this has been like last 6 months on the rise on our platform.
Gotcha. Is that more automated? I mean, social engineering, that's typically there's human perpetrators, but what kinds of, I guess, methods are you seeing used to do these attacks? And then what have you been using to identify them?
Mhm. So I'm not quite sure if they're fully automated or not. I think there is a human factor in there, but
Yeah.
the methodology is actually quite straightforward. So what the fraudsters would do is that they register just a regular user account, which is very easy to do on Bolt because if you sign up for a service like this, you don't expect to show your governmental ID or do a big KYC. So it's very easy to sign up with a new phone number, and then fraudsters would, the scammers would request a ride, for example. And once the driver accepts that ride, which is a fake ride, they don't want to go anywhere, but they just want to get in touch with the driver, they use our in-app communication channel to try to then do social engineering on the driver to get the driver to hand over their password basically and one-time login code. So they would say some, the usual stuff that, hey, I'm with Bolt Gold support, that I need this code to verify your account, or I need this code that could just send to your phone number because this is the only way we can complete the ride. So attacks like this. And the problem there is that luckily most of our drivers are smart enough to recognize that this is a scam. This is an account takeover attempt, so they can cancel the ride. But the problem is that even if they cancel, they have wasted their valuable time, like driving somewhere. So they wasted time and gas of going to this fake pickup location where they could actually be serving our actual customers and making money.
Interesting.
But
Yeah,
yeah, this is happening.
I guess I don't know why I hadn't really considered this, but so you have two sort of categories of users. You have drivers, you have riders, right? Um, and I don't know if I'm missing a category, but who would you say is
Well,
typically?
Yeah, it's those two, but then we also have like Bolt Food. So in
Yeah,
that situation, we have also the courier who's delivering the food. So it's a three-sided marketplace.
gotcha. So you have couriers, and then maybe I guess in this sense, riders would be equivalent to like diners or something,
Yeah,
right?
diners and or we call
Yeah,
them
yeah.
eaters. The diners and then
Eaters. Okay,
restaurant.
gotcha. Um, but yeah, so I mean, across that, that's interesting because I hadn't really considered like drivers themselves being targeted in such a way where, a rider could pretend to be Bolt support.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Um, huh,
And you were asking like how we kind of deal with them. Like, well, one way is to look at the data. You look at the data and you see that those riders, they do have a lot of abnormally high number of cancellations because drivers cancel on them. They understand that this is a scam, they cancel. So you have a lot
right.
of cancellations, no completed trips. So you can assume that this is bad. But sometimes, the drivers can cancel for another reason as well. Maybe that it's a legitimate user, but the place where they're requesting the ride from happens to be out in the middle of nowhere or in a bad area,
Mhm.
so the drivers do not go there. So we don't necessarily only block on based on that data. So we have to look at other elements as well.
On the topic of, the varying markets that you guys serve, where do you see sort of the most abuse? What's been the most problematic?
I wouldn't want to mention any specific countries. Uh, and one of the reasons is that fraud keeps moving around as well. But especially for account takeovers, the attractive markets are, these expensive markets where you have high average transaction values and high earnings for drivers. So the fraudsters would benefit a lot from taking over potentially a driver account that has a lot of earnings and there is money to be made there. And the
Sure.
same, like if they go after the rider accounts, then you want these markets where people have potentially credit cards linked to their account, which have more funds on them. So these tend to be more attractive ones.
On the point of identifying, these fraudsters, you mentioned velocity rules earlier. Would you be able to give any sort of insight on either like a tangible velocity rule or something around like IP or device usage, things like that?
Mhm. Well, I'm not gonna give out any specific rules
Uh,
here. Like, first of all, it will only benefit the
yeah,
fraudsters
yeah, right.
and not the good companies, or because you just have to know your business and where you operate. And for us as well, like the velocity which makes sense in one country may not make sense in another country as well. So that's why you need to have this perspective of knowing your market and the local situation. To give you an example, here in Tallinn in Estonia, our traffic is quite good in general, and we have a lot of availability in terms of number of Bolt cars. So when you order a ride, it's very unlikely that there is a cancellation or multiple cancellations. The driver accepts, and usually the ride completes. Everything is good. But then we have some markets in, let's say, some African countries where there is notoriously bad traffic. So there, what happens is that the driver accepts the ride, but then they see that there is a huge traffic jam between the two, and it takes half an hour for the car to actually arrive at the destination, for example. And it's quite normal to have the cancellation.
Yeah.
So we need to have different velocity rules for Estonia and for some other countries.
Yeah, context matters.
Mm.
Something specifically that I run into with solutioning for some of my clients is handling of a residential IP connection versus a mobile IP connection. So, the expected activity on a residence will be, lower. You would expect to see maybe 1 to 10 devices. Um, Depending on the residence type, as opposed to something like a mobile tower where you see thousands to tens of thousands of unique devices or sessions in a day. So
Mhm. Yeah,
very
absolutely. And another interesting example for our case is that we have to be mindful that for Bolt, for example, if there is a huge event, some sort of concert, Taylor Swift is coming to town, or there is some big sporting event, you're gonna have this massive amount of people in one location all making orders at the same time. So if you have some static velocity rules there, just starting to block at some point, we would lose a lot of business. So we don't obviously know the context during that time. Just looking back, we can identify that, yeah, there was a spike and it
Yeah,
was related to some event, but our rules are usually smarter than just velocity. It takes into account the velocity, and then you also have the history of the user and like, does it all make sense that does the IP match the order country, for example? That's a good thing. But there, what we see is that especially with concerts and sporting events, you have a lot of international visitors there, and a lot of times, especially in Europe, your IP address may not change when you travel between the countries. You might retain your IP address from your home country. It depends on your cell phone provider.
really.
So yeah,
I do know that some offer this routing service to maintain sort of that consistency while they're doing abroad travel.
yes.
Um,
So we see that somebody with a UK phone number, when they travel to Estonia, for example, the IP address still shows up as a UK IP address. So we could potentially have this location mismatch that the order is being placed in Tallinn,
mm,
Estonia, but the IP is in the UK. So our rules need to be mindful of that as well, that that's actually quite okay.
yeah. Interesting edge case to handle for. You have to have smarter dynamic rules.
Mhm.
So, dealing with dealing with, I guess, the emergence of AI and that organized fraud as a service industry, how have you been positioning, or how would you recommend anybody really to position themselves to better handle for these threats?
I mean, if you use an in-house fraud team, then obviously what you need to do is to make sure that your people have the required skills. And whether it's AI or not AI, having the skills to analyze the data and understand the data and make sense of the data that you have, is absolutely a must. There is just being good with data analysis. That's very, very, very needed. And then just being curious and keeping up with the news. That's also good. And then having a compliance team and legal team that works with you to make sure that you can use that data in a compliant way, that's very important.
Sure. Starts with personnel, and then I guess the tools and data that you surround yourself with. And then I guess just having the backing of your organization. It is oftentimes where I see companies don't invest enough in their in-house fraud teams. So, you'll run into people that are kind of struggling, right? Either they'll say, "Oh, I don't have we don't have fraud relative to the money that, the company's making, so it's not really uh, a concern," or, we just don't have you know, people up top don't don't think it's an issue, so they don't have the investment.
Mm.
Well, thank you very much, Jaanus, for joining me. It was good to see you again since last time was MRC. So glad to chat with you.
Oh, it was fun. I always enjoy talking about fraud and sharing the cool stories that we are seeing at Bolt.